Come with me into your profession, take you to deeply analyze various industries, and let you no longer cross industry. There are already 4 million high-quality finished novels titled Nong Xiu Zhen, which can be read with confidence. Keywords of the novel. Professional Heavenly Sacrifice without pop-ups. Download the complete collection of Professional Heavenly Sacrifice TXT, and read the latest chapters of Professional Heavenly Sacrifice. Chapter 1. Great God Level Dating, Crossing the Frontier. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 1. Great God Level Dating, Crossing the Frontier. The afternoon sunshine was slightly tipsy because it was the late autumn season, with very few clouds in the sky. The deep blue sky, illuminated by the scorching white and not too hot sunlight, appeared somewhat dreamy and profound, yet also shrouded in mystery and beauty. In such a season, the 2 to 3 o'clock afternoon is not only the most beautiful time of the day, but also the most romantic season of the year. The words, cool autumn weather, and clear blue like washing, are probably specifically used to describe this kind of weather. Zhang Bai sat on the street side of a coffee shop, with a transparent glass wall beside him. The sunlight shone through the glass wall, casting a faint golden halo that enveloped him. Perhaps due to the issue of facing the sun, looking out of the store, he seemed to be completely immersed in a Buddha wheel-like halo, appearing very dreamy. Like the appearance of the male protagonist in a romantic drama, handsome, dreamy, and somewhat unreal. However, at this moment, Zhang Bai's perfect face was filled with helplessness as he looked around, examining the surroundings and the furnishings of the coffee shop. He found himself tricked. In fact, the decoration of this coffee shop is very good. The walls are made of dreamy powder, with a hint of girlish shyness. The seats are khaki with a hint of light yellow, giving off a youthful and girlish feeling, warm and elegant. Speaking of the place alone, it is a very good and high-end place, very suitable for afternoon tea. However, it is a very suitable place for young men and women to date, but such a place is definitely not suitable for a noodle base. And Zhang Bai looked around and, through other guests around him, he also thoroughly confirmed that this cafe was clearly a coffee shop that focused on couples. This is also the reason why he showed helplessness and a bitter smile on his face, because he didn't come here for a date or a blind date, but for a meeting. That's right, it's the noodle base that netizens met offline for the first time. If the netizen is a woman, that's all. If he looks decent, he may even be able to further develop and achieve a beautiful story, or a romantic love story may appear in his writing. After all, online, the two of them have a very close conversation. But if Zhang Bai remembers correctly, the other party should be a man, very certain of that. And when the two men met for the first time, the other person still chose this kind of place. Why is there something wrong with both of them? In this society, the West is just fine, but in the East, should boys be so careful when going out? This is the reason why Zhang Bai is so helpless, with the thought of being tricked, and even the impulse to turn around and leave. If it weren't for the speculation he had with the other party, he would never have sat down and waited, after all. Who knows what kind of ghosts and snakes are really waiting for? Because it was the place designated by the other party, he also spent an hour taking the subway. After arriving at the place, he realized that he had been tricked, and we had a good conversation online. In addition, Zhang Bai looked at the time and found that there were less than 10 minutes left until we met. Therefore, Zhang Bai finally shook her head helplessly, chose to sit in the reserved seat as agreed, and waited quietly. Since they have already arrived, no matter what kind of ghosts and snakes they are, let's take a look and let's talk. Maybe the other party will also decide casually. If that's the case, we can still use this to make fun of the other party. Besides, in this blue sky and white sun, it's still on the street. It's really like encountering a netizen who is both human and ghost online. He's a man, and there's nothing to be afraid of. Shouldn't there be anything to be afraid of? While Zhang Bai was waiting, his thoughts flew and he scrutinized the layout of this coffee shop. The place is quite large, at least 80.90 square meters. Although each seat is not far away, it is not close. The decoration is quite elegant, and there are not few people. There are 5 or 6 tables with people, and it looks like business is good. Across from him, there was also someone, a woman who seemed to be waiting for someone, probably a blind date. Because I don't know her name, I will temporarily address her as A. At this moment, woman slightly tilted her head, as the two were sitting opposite each other at the table. She turned her side towards Zhang Bai, allowing him to see each other clearly. Well, the appearance is not low yet. Short hair tied to the neck, round and cute face, although somewhat obedient in appearance, it gives off a heroic and spirited taste. The reason for Zhang Bai's presence was that at this moment, the woman was wearing a funny expression, listening attentively with sharp ears, and quietly scrutinizing the position on her right side with the remaining light. Seems to be eavesdropping. But he was also afraid that the person across from him would notice, with a slight disguise. However, I don't think I often do this kind of thing, which seems very unprofessional and has a hint of deceiving others. In addition, with that funny expression on his face, he seemed to have heard something interesting, but he was reluctant to listen, so his movements were a bit creepy. This description of a cute-looking girl may not be appropriate, but when Zhang Bai saw this scene, this adjective popped up. Anyway, it's just a bit of hiding one's ears and stealing the bell. Zhang Bai knew at first sight that the other person was eavesdropping. And Zhang Bai was also attracted by the other person's expression, and looked towards the seat in front of him on the left. The other person was a man and a woman, who had already taken their seats. It seemed that the two had not met before, and this was their first time meeting. If Zhang Bai remembers correctly, they should have walked into the store with him in front and back. If it weren't for the situation where a stranger and a stranger meet for the first time and choose such a decorated coffee shop, it would be obvious what the two of them are doing if it weren't for Zhang Bai's deceitful, noodle-based situation. For blind dates, Zhang Bai has never heard of them or seen them on TV programs, but in reality, he has never seen them. Therefore, after realizing that the other party was on a blind date, he successfully attracted Zhang Bai's attention. Holding multiple life materials to facilitate future writing on this topic, he quietly and carefully observed the two of them without any trace. At this moment, the man is facing away from a piece of cloth, unable to see his face. Judging solely from the man's clothing and figure, the conditions should be quite good, and he looks quite knowledgeable. Because there is also a stool on his right side, holding a bag. Zhang Bai could vaguely see through the opening of the bag that there seemed to be a book inside, which was quite ancient and I don't know what it was for. Because Zhang Bai's family is engaged in the industry related to ancient books, they paid special attention to it, and nowadays, there are not many people going out to bring books. As for the woman, as she was facing Zhang Bai on the left front, she could see the full face of the woman. According to Zhang Bai's aesthetic, it can barely give a score of 7, which is not considered ugly, but it cannot be considered absolutely beautiful. She clearly went through a bit of dressing up, which can be considered as a type of action. It's this makeup that Zhang Bai doesn't like a bit. It's considered heavy makeup and looks a bit gorgeous. He prefers women's armor, which is sweet, cute, clean, and especially has a heroic aura. He should be a less busy person. At this moment, the two of them had already taken their seats. After asking the woman for her opinion, the man ordered 2 cups of coffee, and the atmosphere was a bit awkward and silent. From Zhang Bai's perspective, it can be clearly seen that the man with his back to him seems slightly nervous, and the hands and feet hidden under the table appear to be moving slightly, as if there is nowhere to place them. From this point on, Zhang Bai could see that he was clearly not an experienced host, whether it was a blind date or a date, he was probably an honest person. Miss Liu, right? I don't know what job you do. The awkward atmosphere lasted for a moment, and the man finally tried to find a topic. His voice seemed to be slightly trembling. As soon as you speak, it's an HR-style household registration check. And just this sentence alone, the label can be reduced again. This man is probably not someone who often interacts with women, he's probably a otaku. Zhang Bai listened to the man's slightly awkward words and the other person's awkward expression. Not only did he preliminarily determine the other person's personality, but he also judged that this person should be on a blind date for the first time or at most for the second time. Anyway, I definitely don't have much experience, otherwise I wouldn't just start talking so hard and awkward. The gorgeous woman, known as Miss Lu by the man, formed a sharp contrast with the man. After ordering coffee, she leaned back slightly, crossed her palms with her lower abdomen, and crossed her legs under the table, making herself sit more comfortably. At the same time, she was calm and composed at the moment, constantly scrutinizing the cramped man in front of her with an undisguised gaze, even with some scrutiny. Perhaps it was this scrutiny that made the man feel even more awkward, as he didn't know where his hands and feet were. After discovering the man's behavior, a woman surnamed Lu's expression became somewhat inexplicable. And Zhang Bai noticed that the woman in front of him, Jia, who initially attracted him to look, most of her interesting gaze also fell on this cramped and nervous man, seemingly thinking that such a man was very interesting. Alright, I won't introduce myself anymore. After all, you should have read all the basic information before. Since we've all come together for a blind date, let's not beat around the bush. Let's just go straight and get to the point. After the man finished speaking, the woman remained silent for a moment, slightly retracting her gaze and frowning as she said. Such words clearly surprised the man a bit. He was stunned for a moment before replying, so, how could we use a direct method? The man probably has never experienced such a thing before and doesn't know the rules. His tone seems a bit unconfident, and he looks even more cramped. The woman furrowed her brows again when she saw the other person's performance. She looked up and down at the man and said, although your image is not very handsome, it cannot be considered ugly. I am satisfied with it and can continue to chat. Between words, the woman paused and continued, then let's talk about my specific requirements. My requirements are not high, just a normal 3 media and 6 hiring would suffice. You need to have a suite within the 3rd ring road of Tianfu, at least 3 bedrooms and 1 living room, and my name must be written on it after marriage. As for the car, a few 100,000 yuan is enough. And the dowry, my parents have raised me for decades, it's not easy, and it can't be too little. At least 200,000 to 300,000 yuan. If you have the heart and ability, you can give more. As for the deposit, I am not someone with high requirements, so I won't make detailed requirements. As long as you haven't backed up the loan, I can deposit it together after marriage. But the salary card needs to be handed over to me. Currently, that's the main requirement. For other small details in daily life, we can discuss them in detail in our future understanding Zhang Bai. Is that all that's required? My goodness. Wow, this requirement is really low. Did the matchmaking industry become so competitive? No wonder there are so few marriages among the post-.90s generation. If we don't rely on our parents, who are in their 20s and can graduate for up to 5 years, how many people can meet this requirement? As Zhang Bai's thoughts raced, the man across from the woman did not immediately answer. It was unclear whether he was being suppressed by a small request or pondering something. However, Zhang Bai can be certain that the man was not scared by the woman's conditions. Due to the man's nervousness, he visibly disappeared, and his hands under the table stopped moving, as if he had found a place to place them. From these things, it seems that if he hadn't calmed down, his heart would probably have cooled down. Amidst the curiosity of Zhang Bai and the woman sitting opposite Jia, the man fell silent for a moment. After completely calming down, he calmly looked up and, for the first time, looked at the woman surnamed Lu across the table with the same scrutinizing gaze, just like the opening of the woman before. The man looked at it for a moment before nodding and saying, Miss Lu, I'm barely satisfied with your image. The woman frowned slightly again as she listened to these words. The man ignored the other person's expression and said to himself, since Miss Lu made such a direct request, should I also be able to ask a few questions? The woman nodded calmly and said, you ask. Miss Lu is also an only child, isn't she? The man asked inexplicably. This question surprised Zhang Bai and his eavesdropping colleagues across the table, completely unaware of what the other party was up to or what medicine they wanted to sell in the gourd. The woman surnamed Lu probably followed this question and instinctively thought of something bad. Her eyebrows furrowed completely and she nodded, saying, that's right. The man nodded again and said, are we responsible for your parents after marriage? Isn't that nonsense? My parents don't have any other children. But you don't have to worry about that. My parents have insurance and won't put any financial pressure, just be filial and filial occasionally in life. The woman surnamed Lu appears somewhat sensitive to the issue of men continuing. But at least not as she thought. The worst question about posthumous inheritance, so she nodded and answered. The man nodded again and said, the last question is, will we live with my parents after marriage, or will the two of us come out and live alone? If I were to live with your parents, what would I ask for a 3-bedroom, 1-living-room house? Is it empty for ventilation? The woman replied. She answered with a question, indicating that there was little room for negotiation on this matter. Understood. The man nodded again upon hearing this, paused for a moment, and looked at the woman, saying, do you think this is okay? I'll marry you, you'll meet me, and you'll give me the little bit request you made above. What? Zhang Bai and his peeping companion, Lady Jia, were both stunned at the same time. They were momentarily stunned by this divine turning point and both appeared somewhat stunned. The woman surnamed Lu was also noticeably stunned for a moment, but also didn't come to her senses. She said in confusion, what? I mean, your family is buying us a 3-bedroom house within the 3rd ring road, with a car worth tens of thousands of yuan or more. I don't want savings or anything like that. You don't need to take out the car house loan. After marriage, let's save it together and work hard together. Just turn in my bank card and give it to me. Dowries and the like, my parents have also raised me for decades, providing me with food, drink, and food, as well as education. It was quite difficult back then, and I really had to pay 200,000 yuan as compensation. I don't want you to give me too much. Satisfy these, can I marry you? The man looked straight at the woman surnamed Lu across the table and said, speaking very seriously. Zhang Bai can imagine that the man's expression at this moment should also be sincere, indicating that he may still be staring at the woman with innocent big eyes. Being able to make a soft meal, speaking so confidently and clearly, is definitely a talent. But the woman surnamed Lu was somewhat stunned, with a frozen expression, as if her head was short-circuited, staring blankly at the man without a reply. Pure eavesdropping on the table. But the opposite is true. After a moment of astonishment, his interest increased significantly and he began to scrutinize the man seriously. The man continued, if you're worried about your daily life after marriage, there's no need to worry. You just need to work to support your family. I'm a standard man from the capital of Sichuan, absolutely the upper hall and the lower kitchen. Due to tutoring, as someone who started culinary education at the age of 7 or 8, although not proficient in Sichuan cuisine, one can even become a chef in a hotel. But most of the daily dishes are still familiar, and there are also some pastries, and some Western dishes are occasionally made, of course, just for fun. However, these things are more than enough for daily life. During holidays and other occasions, if you have relatives or friends, you can also prepare a few dishes to meet people, and it will definitely not cause you embarrassment. As for taking care of children in the future, I don't have much experience, but I should be able to learn this. After all, it's all my first time, and we're no different, neither of us has experience. In summary, I think I can definitely be a qualified family cook and professional dad. How do you think I'll marry you? Oh, by the way, The only difference between being a full-time husband and a full-time wife is that I cannot conceive and have a baby in October. This. Because of my innate conditions, I cannot change it and I need you to do it. Given that this is a big difference, it can also be a small difference. After marriage, I don't require you to buy me many expensive luxury goods each year. For example, compared to the same period last year, I don't make any requirements for men's limited edition Swiss watches such as women's cosmetics and bags, handmade limited edition suits, special commemorative cufflinks, expensive limited edition ties, and so on. These, if you give them, I'll take them. If you don't give them, I won't cry and ask for them. If you don't agree, I'll just say that life won't be able to pass, but that kind of thing. You just need to work normally and earn money to support your family, and I will do my best to take care of you during the 10 months since you were pregnant. After giving birth, I will start taking care of your child, and you will continue to work to earn money to support your family. As for when I become a full-time husband, rest assured that I will never complain to you every day about how tired a full-time husband is. I nag you every day, how hard it is to take care of my child at home, how boring it is, and how angry it is to tidy up the house and cook. So much so that when you come home from work and feel mentally exhausted, you still come to bother you, asking for this, asking for that, and even saying how other people's wives are doing. I am very sensible and can definitely do the kind of husband and child heating the Kong, preparing meals every day and waiting for you to finish work. Of course, if you are not satisfied with the only difference that requires you to conceive and feel that having to work to support your family and having children is extremely unfair to you, a new era woman. We don't need to make any fuss about it, and there are still many ways to solve it perfectly. Firstly, we can do dink without children. Secondly, if you are not satisfied with your pregnancy and want to have a child, we can still adopt them. Thirdly, you don't want to get pregnant, adopt, and even have your own child. We cannot do anything illegal like surrogacy. But now the technology of artificial uterus is fully mature and widely used in the market. The price is not too expensive either. If we save for 2 years, we should be able to afford such a service. So this issue is definitely not a problem. I can give you absolute fairness and fully respect you as a new era woman. In summary, Miss Liu, are you satisfied with my conditions and requirements? How about I marry you? Between his words, the man leaned forward slightly, trying to get as close as possible so that the woman surnamed Liu could see more clearly. The expression was probably sincere, even looking at the woman surnamed Liu with a hint of flattery. What exactly do you mean? The woman was stunned for a moment and didn't know how to reply. Obviously, even if she had seen big winds and waves, it was the first time she had encountered such a battle, to the point where she stuttered for a while before uttering such a sentence. What do you mean? The man replied with confusion, of course it's a blind date. Look, you said you only asked for this, which is obviously a bit unfair to you. I can't just go on a blind date. Let's just make things worse for you, so I'll marry you. I'll just make things worse. After all, gender equality is not the same nowadays. My demands can be said to absolutely respect equality. Strictly speaking, if you marry me and I marry you, even if the above conditions are exactly the same, there are still some differences for me. You know, after all, in Chinese people's minds, marrying you belongs to the category of cutting corners, digging ears, and eating soft food. In terms of reputation, I will be damaged, discriminated against, and it does not belong to complete fairness. However, considering the only difference that I cannot conceive in October, even though I have come up with several solutions and compensation concessions, it is still a bit different. So I won't make a special distinction about this loss of reputation. Let's treat it as the difference caused by gender differences. Do you think it's okay? The woman surnamed Liu gradually realized that she probably thought the man was washing her up. Her face turned cold and she looked at the man coldly, saying, "Are you here for a blind date?" End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Beginning. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Beginning. Endless darkness surged in, and Zhang Bai seemed to see the endless stars being swallowed by something. This compilation has been halted due to the death of the host. The birth of a new host has been detected, the compilation has been reset to 0, and a comeback has begun. Perhaps in a moment, perhaps for countless years, a strange information emerged and woke Zhang Bai up. Ah! After he uttered a babble, suddenly, Zhang Bai, lying flat on the brink of death, sat up in shock, followed by a series of life philosophy. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? I am Zhang Bai, a scholar, and I am accompanying my little sister. What the hell? A scholar. Accompanying the little sister. I'm on the dough. Crash. Wait, car. Different thoughts of reaction rushed in, and Zhang Bai jumped up in shock and bounced off the bed. Bed. Chaotic thoughts filled his mind, and Zhang Bai only realized something was wrong. He looked up and around, unsure when he had already changed the world. The surroundings are no longer filled with girlish couple cafes. Behind him is a four-legged carved wooden bed with a classical charm, hanging thick mosquito nets like gauze. In a relatively large room, the layout is elegant and antique, quite nice. Is this layout? It seems to be the decoration of ancient rooms. Miss Qingyu is becoming more and more worldly. Good dance. Oh, what's wrong with the officials? A faint and absent sound came from outside the room, seeming unusually lively, just as if it was a bit inappropriate. At the tip of the nose, a faint aroma mixed with a not too strong rouge scent indicates that this is not the previous CAFA, but rather a somewhat unorthodox place. A high-end roll-playing club. Do city people know how to play like this? The problem is that he is an honest person. Zhang Bai looked at the room with a bewildered expression, and was completely dumbfounded. The last memory is the oncoming front of the car, the broken glass, and the crazy expression of the woman. If I remember correctly, even if it wasn't a CAFA waking up, it should have been a hospital. But Zhang Bai looked around again and found that the entire room had no modern facilities at all, and there were many candles around, indicating that not even an electric light was installed. What the hell? Dreaming. That's not right, it feels like the layout and furnishings are even more professional and realistic than the filming site. Or is it like this in the underworld? Click. As he looked around, Zhang Bai instinctively lifted his step, but made a soft noise, as if he had stepped on something. Red fruit soles also felt a different touch, as if stepping on a package of crispy noodles. Subconsciously looking down, Zhang Bai looked surprised again. In front of the bed, there is an area that covers about 2 square meters, and an extremely complex array is depicted with something unknown whether it is blood or red cinnabar. In the array, there are also 5 strange objects placed at several key points. A dried toad, a scorched centipede, a dead snake filled with the smell of alcohol. Zhang Bai raised his foot slightly, and under his feet was a pitch-black crow, but the crow had stiffened like a charcoal block and had been crushed by him. From the touch of my feet just now, it doesn't seem like a normal crow either. Looking at this formation, Zhang Bai felt a slightly eerie aura permeate. This is... Hiss. Without waiting for him to do anything, looking at this picture, his mind suddenly exploded and countless pieces of information flooded in. In an instant, Zhang Bai seemed to fall into the void, immersed in the pitch-black starry sky. However, in this starry sky, there are not countless stars, but photos rotating around him like slides. With the emergence of photos, some information comes to mind, and fragmented memories emerge one after another. Very incomplete, it seems to be a memory from its predecessor. For a long time, Zhang Bai finally came to his senses, as if he had traveled through time. Just as I reached out and wanted to touch one of the photos, the entire space was a mess, and all the photos converged like meteors, being absorbed by a strange large book. Zhang Bai instinctively looked at it, and a familiar feeling struck. Is this the book of Fire Giant that we met at a blind date CAFA during the car accident? Subconsciously reaching out to open the book and take a look, but just as I touched it, an inexplicable stream of information surged in. Although there was no text at all, Zhang understood its meaning. Missing destiny, no destiny, unable to start profession compilation at present. What kind of ghost? Without waiting for Zhang to continue moving, the space shook again and he was ejected from the space. When he regained his senses, he had returned to the antique room once again, and this time, Zhang was no longer lost. With the emergence of those very broken memories, he seemed to understand his current situation. He should have died, but he didn't die completely, he traveled through time. Traveling to a scholar strolling through a brothel. What is this? After writing too many stories, it ultimately pays off. So was that book his golden finger just now? And was it supposed to be a huge golden finger? Did he accidentally hit the passenger car and cross over by chance? Lack of destiny leads to no destiny and the inability to use the golden finger. Is it because he died? Or is he considered an unqualified traveler compared to the fire giant? Or is it because of these things? Thinking of this, Zhang instinctively lowered his head, and a strange formation caught his eye. Well, is this disappearing? I saw that the originally eerie and blood-red formation was gradually fading away. When Zhang looked at the formation again, it was almost invisible, and the 5 eerie items, resembling sacrificial offerings, seemed to be slowly dissipating and weathering. Ha! At this moment, strands of cool wind blew in, causing Zhang who was almost red in fruit, to be awakened, interrupting his contemplation in contemplation. Looking up, the paper-carved wooden window was wide open, and outside was a pitch-black night, with a gentle breeze blowing from the window. Zhang frowned slightly. Looking back, besides her own clothes, there was also a woman with red fruits lying in the innermost corner of the bed, like a dead pig. According to the blurry and fragmented memory of his predecessor, it seems, probably, that he came there or something. But it wasn't from the original person who came voluntarily, but inexplicably, in a daze, the girl took the initiative to bring it, not for money. And if I remember correctly, my predecessor died there or something. Among the few clear memories, the most profound one is that with the final venting, it seems that not only that breath is released, but also everything about the original owner, including life. So, did this guy die at Mount Ma and become a promiscuous ghost? But as Zhang continued to hold meetings on memories, he discovered something unusual. In my memory, the woman on the bed seemed to have been lying on her stomach like a dead pig, without doing anything with him. And the person who had a horse fight with him seemed to have someone else, but couldn't remember the specific appearance of that horse, and there was only a vague figure in my memory. In his thoughts, Zhang frowned and lowered his head. He looked at the eerie formation under his feet again, and the blood-red lines had completely disappeared. Only a few eerie items remained, and a little bit continued to dissipate. I looked up at the bed and then at the open window. Everything indicates that this unlucky guy didn't die simply. Efforts were made to search for memories, but little relevant information was obtained, and even because memories were too fragmented, many things about the original body were unclear in a short period of time. After a long silence, Zhang grabbed his thigh a few more times, causing a piercing pain. After he confirmed that he was not dreaming, Zhang was once again lost, unsure of what to do next. After all, although he has written many stories, they are all talk on paper. When it comes to himself, it's still like this. He really doesn't know what to do and is a bit caught off guard. Oh, everyone, officials, what are you doing? Executing official duties. At this moment, the previously faint sounds outside became noisy, as if something had happened. Someone broke into the building. It was also because of this voice that the bewildered Zhang was pulled back to his senses. Stay calm and think about the usual way of writing. Well, the character setting is roughly clear, and the unlucky guy who died on Mount Ma is miraculously resurrected. So in this situation, it should be creating conflicts, starting a certain plot, and then burying hidden threads. Shit, you're still committing a professional flaw at this time, creating conflicts with ghosts and seeking death. Well, in this situation, if he wants to survive, how should he handle the current situation and how can he do it better? Firstly, the original body appears to have died on horseback. An empty bed with an open window. Let's first set the best scenario, assuming that the eerie horse jumped out of the window. At this moment, the other party should also think that they are dead. From the perspective of the assassin, the other party should leave as soon as possible, rather than staying. Moreover, he has skimmed through some of the shattered and extreme memories of the original owner, indicating that it seems to be an ancient world. Looking at the formation that had no trace under his feet again, Zhang Bai's thoughts paused. Well, there may be supernatural powers and others, and I will delve into them later. Because these are not the main things, currently the main thing is to leave no matter what the situation in this world is. According to the original owner's memory, he is a destitute and poor scholar. If this strange thing happened, he wouldn't be able to handle it or cope with it as a destitute scholar to the extreme, so if you want to survive, the top priority should be to leave quietly and without any trace. After all, if discovered, he shouldn't be able to survive. Constable Qin, Jianxiang Tower is not a casual place. Ah! Get out of here, who gave you the courage to disturb? At this moment, the noise outside grew louder and louder, as if someone was searching the room, interrupting Zhang Bai's continued thoughts. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Doubleware. It's not possible. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Doubleware. It's not possible. Looking down at the traceless wooden floor and then at the wide open window, which was on the third floor, at a height of 7 meters above ground level, Zhang Bai quickly extinguished the thought of jumping out of the window. As for reporting directly to the government, Zhang Bai looked at the room where no trace of crime had left, and directly denied this idea. Not to mention this bizarre situation, will the official believe it or handle it? Just because of severe memory loss and identity issues, Zhang Bai must keep a low profile. Besides this, there is also a very likely horse that was ridden by its predecessor. Not to mention whether the other party will pay attention to this, but if he causes a stir himself, he will definitely be noticed. And now, he definitely can't handle that horse. If someone finds him again, the best outcome would probably be to let him sacrifice his life to ride again. He didn't just wake up and plan to be a flirtatious ghost again. Thoughts flickered, and the sound outside grew louder and more noisy. After clarifying his thoughts, Zhang Bai no longer felt lost. After finalizing a series of ideas, he decisively turned around and first explored the woman lying on her stomach. As expected, I just fell asleep or was knocked unconscious. This is good news to prove that the horse wants to create an accident scene, and even with extraordinary power, it doesn't want to attract attention. In my thoughts, I grabbed the scattered clothes on and under the bed and began to put them on haphazardly. Looking at the battlefield, the battle between the original body and the horse seems quite wild. Clothes are traditional ancient costumes, layer by layer very complex. If it weren't for the basic memory of their predecessors, they would probably have to be taught how to dress now. Hurriedly putting on his clothes, the search seemed to be getting louder and louder. It was already the third floor, and he should be here. Although there are no abnormalities here now and he is not afraid to investigate, his life is the biggest abnormality, and it is also unclear what is being searched outside. And judging from the external dynamics and situation, it seems that no one has died before in this Jianxiang Tower, so the horse is unlikely to be the girl from this Jianxiang Tower. Today is also her first time committing a crime here, and she should have jumped out of the window. Although this is a good thing, if he waits so long to search his house, no matter what, he will definitely attract a lot of attention to this room. If this horse doesn't jump out of the window and is still in the building, although it doesn't pay attention to a dead person. After searching the room, there hasn't been any riot yet, then it will definitely attract attention. So even if there is nothing unusual here now, he cannot wait for the search to be completed before running away. Zhang Bai hurriedly put on his clothes and opened the room in a disheveled manner. What caught the eye was a quite large wooden building, surrounded by huge buildings on three sides and hollow in the middle. He was now on the third floor, with a wide walkway in front of the door. In the middle of the building, a three-pronged staircase came into view. Similar to the layout of many ancient large buildings in TV dramas, it is just more luxurious and cliché. At this moment, the building is very chaotic, with many people like him hastily coming down in disheveled clothes, of different ages. Some are like him, in their 20s, some look middle-aged uncles, and even elderly people. Throughout the entire building, you can see many constables wearing black tight-fitting clothes, including both men and women. Female constable. That's not the proper ancient world anymore. Or dynasties belong to modern times. They searched the room and didn't seem to stop people from leaving, they just checked at the door and seemed to be looking for someone. Are you looking for that horse or something else, purely coincidental? Zhang Bai looked around at this moment, and the search was still ongoing. They had already arrived at the building next to him, and the noise, screams, and roars continued. As they had not yet arrived at the building on his side, they were relatively quiet and not many came out. Zhang Bai walked out the door and nodded with a few people who came out to check upon hearing the commotion. He hurriedly left the room and walked down the stairs of the building towards the downstairs. The wooden stairs converge at the center of several buildings to form a small platform, which then converges into a stream and heads towards the lobby. Not only are there constables at the entrance, but there are also constables standing in the hallway. The constables ignored the people who had left, just kept scrutinizing, as if investigating something. 1. As soon as he reached the intersection of the stairs, Zhang Bai felt a slight vibration in his mind, as if there was a slight movement in his book. A strange feeling struck, and guided by it, he instinctively looked towards the female constable standing in the corridor beside him. This is the stranger woman who was on a blind date at a coffee shop during a car accident. Jia, the round face, sweet and cute appearance, but also the heroic temperament, except for different clothes, different hairdress, is exactly the same as the one who wanted a white paper object in the coffee shop before. Just like him now, he looks the same, has the same name, but his attire and identity are completely different. Double wearing. Looking at the woman Zhang Bai inexplicably felt a desire to approach her, as if it were the most primitive instinct, not strong, but exceptionally clear. Golden Finger wants to soak this woman. Due to Zhang Bai's sudden pause, the female constable also turned her gaze to him. After glancing at the disheveled piece of cloth for a moment, the other party expressionlessly averted their gaze, with no difference in expression. I don't seem to know him. Zhang Bai woke up instantly, intending to test whether the contact with the other person was also a traveler. Seeing this situation, the words that had reached my throat were instantly swallowed back, lowered my head again, and hurriedly left. The entire Tianxiang building is a bit chaotic, but it is still within acceptable range, which can be considered as orderly amidst the chaos. Zhang Bai walked out of the building without any problems, resulting in being stopped. When he left Tianxiang Tower, what caught his eye was the pitch-black streets, which should have been summer. The sky was not completely pitch black yet, and it was faintly visible. Standing at the door, Zhang Bai was once again lost for a moment, then took a deep breath and spat out the turbidity in his chest. Well, the top priority is to find a safe place and sort out the memory information in your mind. Without hesitation, he hurried towards his original home based on the memories in his mind. There's a dead person. Just as he left half the street, Zhang Bai heard a scream from behind, as if it was coming from Tianxiang Tower. So, after encountering his predecessor like this, he was not the only one who was inexplicably horse-ridden. Is it more than one horse, or is it that she was full of combat power and ridden more than once in a night? Also, are those constables here to find this horse? Continuous crime. Or is it purely a coincidence in my mind? The open window flashed by. If multiple people die and the killer Ma doesn't look back to investigate the situation, he should be safe in the short term. And fortunately, he came out early, otherwise there might have been some commotion and it would have been difficult for him to leave. The steps under my feet kept moving, even accelerating a lot, and I hurriedly left. In my mind, there are not many clear memories, only a few scenes. And the original home is one of them, so there is no need to ask anyone. It can be considered fortunate amidst misfortune. After all, the current situation cannot be questioned. Many people may not have noticed that there are not many memory images that ordinary people can think of in their daily lives, and many memories are still incomplete. More importantly, concepts formed by countless experiences and memories. For example, when you think of childhood now, not countless childhood images come to mind, but rather a concept of childhood formed after these experiences of time. When this concept is formed, every time you first think of childhood, the meaning of this concept that you understand first emerges, and you will instantly understand what childhood is. If you continue to delve deeper into your memory afterwards, it will be various detailed memory flashes, which are not too many and vague. This is called conceptualization of memory. And Zhang Bai's current situation is that he has these conceptual memories, but the specific memory images cannot be personally experienced. So it takes a lot of time to clean up, or related external factors trigger corresponding concepts, in order to deepen memories and appear corresponding flashback images. Dingling. Dingling. Passing through 3 streets and approaching home, Zhang Bai heard a crisp sound. Subconsciously, he turned to the roadside and looked up, leaving him stunned. In the dark of the night, a group of short-haired young people wearing strange black police uniforms and black police hats rode bicycles, whistling past towards Zhang Bai, seemingly heading towards Tianxiang Tower. That's right, it's just modern police uniforms and bicycles with strange styles, just like entering a patrol team in Hengdian. This group of people, ignoring Zhang Bai, roared past under Zhang Bai's stunned gaze, seemingly accustomed to Zhang Bai's expression. Bicycles and modern-style long patrol uniforms, so this world is similar to the 18th and 19th centuries when the technological revolution began in the late Qing dynasty and early Republic of China. Because it is not his own memory and is very incomplete, Zhang Bai needs to trace many things in his mind at this moment in order to have a general understanding. Because the bicycle triggered his ideological anchor, some information began to emerge, still somewhat chaotic. And precisely because of this, in the current situation, it is better to go home first before cleaning up. In other cases, when you go home, you can slowly clean up. Although there may not seem to be a curfew, it is clearly ancient culture, so it is safer to go home early. With this in mind, Zhang Bai no longer hesitated and continued to hurry towards home. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Brother. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Brother. In a moment, Zhang Bai walked 2 more blocks and arrived at the place in his memory. This is a rather old neighborhood, with old wooden houses on both sides of Qingshe Street. The air is filled with a slightly rotten and murky smell. Obviously, even if this is not an ancient slum, it is not a high-end place. You're back, why are you so late today? At the entrance of the alley, a young man of 20.4 or 5 years old, with a resolute face and a strong figure, who looked 5 times like Zhang Bai, met Zhang Bai with a worried expression. The other party was wearing a tattered linen short divination, a pair of linen pants, and a pair of tattered cloth shoes on their feet. With his arms exposed, his skin bronze-colored, his muscles sharp and angular, and a lot of tendinous flesh, he looks like a master with a lot of strength. It's just a bit dirty. The old clothes were already a bit dirty, but now they seem to have some pitch-black stains sticking to them, looking like ink. The biggest difference between him and Zhang Bai in traditional ancient attire is his short, steel needle-like hair. The entire image resembles the workers who ran to the dock during the warlord era. The man's name is Zhang Bucheng, and he was originally his own brother. He worked as a laborer and seemed to be a peripheral member of the gang. Well, it's not the kind of member who collects protection fees, it's more like being a dock labor leader. They are their original parents who rely on food and clothing, and the two brothers rely on each other. But looking at the two of them, they actually look more like servants and destitute young masters. In my mind, segments of information flashed by. As he delved deeper, a complex emotion of disgust and shame towards Zhang Bucheng struck, causing Zhang Bai's eyebrows to furrow slightly. Did you be bullied again at the school? Zhang Bucheng, who was approaching, saw Zhang Bai, who was disheveled, and his face changed with anger. Zhang Bucheng's words interrupted Zhang Bai's thoughts, and when he came to his senses, he said with an indifferent expression, "It's okay. Who is it, tell me, see if I can beat him to death." Zhang Bucheng pursued with an unpleasant expression. "I said it's okay." Zhang Bai said impatiently. "It's not that he's crazy, but that the way they interact is so strange. That's how Zhang Bai treated his brother. If he had a good face, it wouldn't be right." Upon seeing this, Zhang Bucheng immediately dared not say anything more and said, "The food may be a bit cold, I'll go heat it up." After speaking, walk into the alley. By the way, this is today's wages. After speaking, he clumsily took out a few copper coins from his pocket and handed them to Zhang Bai. Zhang Bai took the money in shock, his hands touching each other with a rough feeling that contrasted sharply with Zhang Bai's tender and white hands, leaving Zhang Bai speechless for a moment. According to memory, Zhang Bucheng worked to earn money for his original body's education, and he also turned it in daily, which was kept by his younger brother's original body. And his original emotions towards the brother who raised him were also very complex, moving, ashamed, and more disgusted. It can be said that the two brothers are very strange. Of course, the cause of this strange phenomenon is not the self-esteem of Zhang Bai, a scholar, who despises his own brother. But it's because they're two brothers, in this current situation, it's all his brother's fault. Well, at least most of it's his fault. The original family originally belonged to a moderately prosperous family. My father was a doctor and had his own small pharmacy. In this Jingle city, life was also decent. So the childhood of the two brothers was really very close, and their relationship was excellent. I have been a bit timid since I was young, but Zhang Bucheng is very wild and often beats and bullies those wild boys who were originally around. But when Zhang Bucheng was 12 years old and 15 years old, his father was infected while his mother was also infected. Fortunately, his father reacted quickly and separated them. And in just 3 or 4 days, the couple went, leaving them to rely on each other. There was a sudden upheaval at home. Although Zhang Bucheng was already 15 years old at the time, he should have considered becoming an adult in this era. However, due to his previous family background, life was carefree, and he was a bit wild, so he was not very sensible. Half-aged boy, facing the sudden death of his parents, left him at a loss. Afterwards, he became involved in some bad habits and entered the gambling game with the people who were mixed up with him. It's highly likely that someone played a trick on me. Not only did they deplete the savings of the elderly couple, but they also ran out of even the pharmacies for their economic sources. If it weren't for the cleverness of his predecessor, the above-hanging suicide would have awakened Zhang Bucheng, and he probably would have lost even his only home. And because of this series of events, Zhang Bucheng finally matured and took on life. In addition, his father Dr. Zhang has treated many people in the past, which has some connections. Under the care of some nostalgic people, the two brothers also survived like this. But because of all these factors, it has also led to the current situation. Zhang Bai hates his brother, at least on the surface. But Zhang Bucheng is afraid of Zhang Bai. The two are dependent on each other, seeing each other as their only family member. His brother Zhang Buqing probably understood that all the things he had done before were that he himself was not human and felt sorry for his younger brother, losing all his property. So the two brothers, for 5 or 6 years, have been living together so strangely. While thinking, I entered the small courtyard. The yard is very old, but it is not very bad. 2 wing rooms, 1 living room, plus a kitchen, with a small courtyard outside. Preliminary estimates suggest that it is at least over 100 square meters. To be honest, in this situation, when it comes to family background or real estate, it is already better than countless people in their past lives. At least not less than Zhang Bai's past life. After all, he is also someone who has a house in the city. But here, let's eat. While Zhang Bai was constantly pondering his memory, Zhang Buqing had already heated up the food and brought it up. 2 thick porcelain bowls, each with a bowl of batter, containing a few lumps of sweet potatoes and some pickled vegetables. Zhang Bai smelled it. It should be congee made of corn and chestnut rice. His bowl was noticeably thicker, while the other person only had half of the bowl and it was a bit thin. Zhang Bai frowned subconsciously as he looked at it. What miserable 2 brothers. Is there a shortage of food at home? Zhang Bai frowned and asked. Raising 2.5 young men alone is already considered difficult. It will be even more difficult for him to continue studying. If it weren't for the fact that Zhang Bai had been able to study since childhood and had achieved some success, and his parents had already caught the attention of the master before their death, causing them to often owe debts, Zhang Bai would not have been able to continue his studies. So their lives are very tight. I changed to a new job these days, which was relatively easy. I didn't put in much effort, so I wasn't too hungry, so I cooked less. It was probably because I saw Zhang Bai's gaze and felt concern, and Zhang Buqing smiled. On his resolute face, there was a bright smile, a bit naive and pleasing, as if he was happy with Zhang Bai's inquiry. In ancient times of poverty, even in the case of 2 meals, if one was tight, the dinner would still be very exquisite because without work at night, hunger would pass. Zhang Bai silently glanced at the other person, then said nothing more and buried his head in eating. Well, it's not very delicious, or rather difficult to swallow. The chestnut rice should not have been treated thoroughly, and some of the bran and corn are also very coarse, resulting in a paste that is not only not smooth, but also rough, with some stinging throat. Even Zhang Bai, who comes from a rural background, feels a bit terrible. However, the energy stored in the original body is not much, and after experiencing such a fierce battle in the Tianxiang Tower, I am indeed starving to the point of my chest pressing against my back. Therefore, Zhang Bai silently drank congee with pickles. After drinking congee, Zhang Bai subconsciously got up to brush the bowl. Hey, I'll come, you go read a book. Zhang Bu immediately said. Zhang Bai paused for a moment before saying anything. He silently put down his bowl and got up to return to his own room. Ignite the oil lamp at the window and look around the room. His bedroom is quite large, it's the master bedroom, about 10 to 20 square meters, but it doesn't seem spacious. On the left side of the house, there is a 4-legged wooden bed and a small wooden table next to it. The wooden table is located under a paper and wood window, which looks like the original owner's reading place. On the right side of the house, there are several boxes. Most of the items inside are related to pharmacies and doctors, stacked together, making the room appear a bit messy and crowded. Lying on the old wooden bed, Zhang Bai took a long breath and began to carefully sort out the memories in his mind. Firstly, he should have indeed traveled through a world that is extremely similar to his previous life's culture. However, history is vastly different. There are also Spring and Autumn and Warring States periods, as well as pre-Qin and Han dynasties in this world, but not Tang, Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties. After the Han dynasty, there were only the Qin and the Xia. Surprisingly, the Great Qin dynasty lasted for thousands of years, being replaced by the Xia dynasty established by Taizu Zhu Yuanzhang 400 or 500 years ago, and then the 400-year Xia dynasty continues to this day. The reason why a millennium-old dynasty can emerge and last for so long is that this world is not ordinary and possesses extraordinary power. As for extraordinary power, the original body should not have known much about it, but now with incomplete memory, that's even less. Dong dong. Zhang Bai was lying in bed clearing his memory when a knock on the door came from outside. He stopped, got up, and opened the door. With a cold expression, he asked, "What's going on?" "I took off my clothes, let me see if I'm injured," Zhang Buqing said, holding a small porcelain vase. Obviously, he was afraid of being beaten and wanted to apply medicine to him. Upon hearing these words, Zhang Bai looked at Zhang Buqing, who was within reach, and felt a slight fluctuation in her heart. The faint medicinal taste mixed with a slightly pungent ink and sweat odor filled the nose. Zhang Bai suppressed his emotions, but there was no expression on his face. He said, "No need, I didn't fight with anyone." After speaking, Zhang Bai closed the room with a cold expression on his face. As a newcomer, it's better to maintain the original owner's design for now. Touch. After a slight sound, Zhang Buqing stood at the door holding a porcelain vase. After a moment, he silently turned around and left without saying a word. The deep affection between the two in childhood and their current dependence on each other have made this only hand and foot precious. Combined with the guilt of his past mistakes, he appeared somewhat humble. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Jingle Academy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Jingle Academy. Zhang Bai returned to the room and lay in bed again. However, consciousness once again came to my mind. In the deep consciousness like a starry sky, a quaint book was suspended in front of me, and Zhang Bai reached out to touch it again. Missing destiny, no destiny, unable to start profession compilation at present. Still, an inexplicable message struck, leaving Zhang Bai with a bewildered expression. This should be his golden finger, but what exactly is it and how should it be used? As this idea emerged, a little bit of information reappeared in my mind. The path of parents is to escape into time and space, raise children. Before entering the path, illness comes out first. What kind of ghost is this? Can you speak human language? Originally, the inexplicable information was translated in my mind, but with the emergence of Zhang Bai's idea, the inexplicable information changed once again. It seems that these pieces of information can be expressed in the most understandable way according to Zhang Bai's subconscious cognition. The information in front of him seemed to have turned into a light curtain, with a very straightforward message appearing on it. Occupation. Parents' fate. 0 cultivation. None skill. None sub-profession. Not enabled locked-in sub-profession. None primary occupational disease. Immediate peak evolution compilation progress. 0%, no destiny, currently unable to activate the weaving shuttle. Please obtain a destiny. Immediately, harmony, peak. You will become the absolute god of spear hands, hitting every shot but also losing your life as a result. Please carefully keep your spear and cherish the tools of the crime. Is this golden finger meant for him to raise a child? Also, what kind of ghost is this occupational disease? Working parents. Occupational diseases. Immediately peak. Well, is it legendary? What kind of offering sacrifices to heaven with boundless magical power? Still beginner. That means there are also intermediate occupational diseases and advanced occupational diseases. Junior level is like this. What is intermediate level? The younger generation is born into calamity. Is it difficult for children to reach adulthood? Ha! Although he knows what kind of sacrificial ceremony is, with boundless magical power, the question is. It seems, probably, that means he is being sacrificed. What kind of broken golden finger is this? Is it because he picked it up that he became the one being sacrificed? After opening the golden finger, getting married and developing the next generation, burping farts on the day of the wedding, causing the sun to go against the heavens and become supernatural. What's the use of this useless thing then? Go to the underworld and become the king of hell. Zhang Bai looked at the information in the book in front of him, feeling a bit numb. He was lying in a bed full of frustration and didn't know how to vomit. After studying the panel for a moment, with no results or anything else to do, Zhang Bai turned his attention to the cabinets in the room and the medical classics left by his former father. Well, the storage is good and there is no dust left. The predecessor should occasionally take a look when I have free time. Obtaining medical knowledge and skills, lacking core system and entry-level guidance, unable to work. For a long time, when Zhang Bai roughly flipped through the medical book that his father valued the most, a message popped up. In a moment of shock, Zhang Bai looked back at the book in his mind with a happy expression on his face. Occupation. Parents' fate. 0 cultivation. None skill. Benchout medical LV0 sub-profession. Not enabled locked-in sub-profession. None primary occupational disease. Immediate peak evolution compilation progress. 0% Benchout medical, non-entry, LV0, medical apprentice level knowledge is not systematic, and due to the lack of a core system, it is not possible to use it to join a medical apprentice, but it has a certain effect on treating diseases and saving people. Looking at the skills of the herbal medicine, Zhang Bai's face lit up with joy. Doctor. 100 schools of thought. Is there a strange power in this world? This is really a good harvest. Even if you haven't been able to obtain your destiny, having such a panel is still a good cheat. In his thoughts, Zhang Bai turned to other medical books and kept flipping through them. In this way, Zhang Bai saw most of the night at a glance. Although he had not acquired any skills, at least he felt that his knowledge of traditional Chinese medicine was constantly improving in his mind, which was countless times faster than normal learning. With this, he doesn't have to worry about his basic survival in this world anymore. Zhang Bai didn't know how long he had been studying, and his thoughts flew wildly, slowly falling asleep. The next morning, when Zhang Bai woke up, his brother Zhang Buqing had already gone out to work. There are several dead dough cakes on the table. Is it his breakfast for today? Lunch. Zhang Bai took the cake and knocked it. Dong dong. Good guy, you're so tough. If it's your mouth or stomach, no matter which side is not strong, I can't stand your hard work. Helplessly shaking his head, packing his things, and based on his memory, he headed towards the academy. This is a medium-sized city called Jingle City, which is relatively prosperous probably because it is not too far from Wangdu and relies on a canal. His family lives in the west of the city, and the academy is located in the south of the city, spanning only half of the city area. Although it was still early in the morning, the market was already very lively, with various vendors coming in an endless stream. It was at this moment that Zhang Bai truly realized that he had entered a completely different era. After crossing several main streets, the surrounding environment began to show significant changes. The dilapidated houses along the way have disappeared and become two-story wooden buildings with different styles. The street vendors have gradually disappeared and been replaced by shops on both sides. And unlike before, which was purely ancient, here we occasionally see some modern things, such as strangely dressed people, rare bicycles, and so on. All kinds of traces indicate that Xia is experiencing the impact of foreign culture. Moreover, it is evident that the south of the city is a wealthy area, and in this era, foreign products are high-end products. According to memory, today's Great Xia should be similar to the era of the late Qing dynasty, when the East was dim and Western culture was flourishing. Zhang Bai looked all the way and arrived at the academy, standing at the entrance. As he looked at the plaque of Jingle Academy, memories related to the academy began to constantly flash in his mind. What are you looking at? A familiar voice pulled Zhang Bai back to his senses. Is the character of Zhang Bai. Zhang Bai turned his head and saw that the speaker was a young man of 17 or 18 years old, just like him, but their attire was completely different. The other party is wearing modern clothing similar to Zhongshan attire, but with long hair and a Zhongshan hat. From Zhang Bai's current perspective, it feels somewhat out of place, which is probably an independent characteristic of this era. Yang Liang, styled Shouxin, is Zhang Bai's desk mate friend in the academy. My family has overseas channels and sells foreign fabrics, so I come from a wealthy family. Not only that, but his grades are also on par with his predecessor, ranking among the top of the class and being a standard elite. Shouxin, early morning. Zhang Bai flashed a message from the other person in his mind, and a smile appeared. What are you looking at? I've seen you looking like this from a long distance, Yang Liang said, looking at the door for a moment. It's nothing, it's just that I didn't pay attention before. I just realized today that the words on the plaque of this college feel very good. Zhang Bai responded. Upon hearing this, Yang Liang also looked up at the plaque. Let's go, it's getting late, don't be late. Zhang Bai took a step and spoke. Upon hearing this, Yang Liang immediately followed suit. It can be inferred from the name Jingle Academy that it is the best official academy in Jingle City. Coupled with the reasons of the times, many people in the Great Xia dynasty sought change, and of course, academies were at the forefront of the times, so there was a strong fusion of ancient private schools and modern universities. Even teaching has now been divided into two schools. The old and the new. The conservative school still only studies Confucian classics, while the reformist school has reduced the proportion of Confucian classics and started learning new ones. Zhang Bai belongs to the reformist faction, and there is already a so-called class difference. The class where Zhang Bai is located has about 20 people, which can be considered quite large. Everyone is of similar age, all around 17 or 18 years old, with only 2 or 3 in their 20s. However, the layout of this classroom is still similar to that of an ancient private school. The entire classroom has no walls on 3 sides, only a few pillars supporting it. A long water table and a mat are clearly sitting on the ground, with 2 pavilions and corridors dedicated to preaching. The only one with a wall is the teacher's lecture, without a blackboard. Overall, the layout is quite similar to that of a private school. Zhang Bai and the others came in relatively late, and at this moment, many people had already arrived, sitting in their respective seats, whispering to each other. And in the corner that Zhang Bai didn't notice, a young man saw Zhang Bai and his pupils slightly contracted, as if seeing Zhang Bai coming to school, he was quite frightened. Immediately, he concealed his expression and calmly resumed reading his book. And all of Zhang Bai's spirits were attracted by the strange art style in front of him. 20 or so people, half of whom are like him, wearing traditional long shirts, and some are wearing Zhongshan suits. In the Zhongshan suit, most of the hair is long, with only a few being short. These people gathered together, making Zhang Bai feel that his art style was indeed somewhat strange, almost like the intersection of the times. How about it, Wen Yu? Are you confident this time? Zhang Bai just sat down, and a man behind him, dressed in an ancient robe, spoke up. What? Zhang Bai looked back in confusion. Li Wenhan, also known as Yu, lives in the west of the city and runs a restaurant at home. He belongs to the same family background as his original family when they were not in decline, and belongs to a humble family. Yesterday's assessment is about to yield results today. Li Wenhan replied, with a hint of anticipation and unease in his words. Upon hearing these words, Zhang Bai's memory came to mind. Yesterday, some people were called in and a special assessment was held, which was different from the previous exam content. It is said that it was based on different test questions given by different people. His exam questions, in addition to covering some basic learning content, seemed to be more about medical issues. Not bad. Zhang Bai replied as she heard this. So I'm quite confident, I feel pretty good too, Yang Liang interjected at this moment. I heard that this assessment was specially prepared because there was a shortage of personnel in the new system reform. Yang Liyang's voice was not small and instantly attracted the attention of many people. Really? Isn't it possible to become an official directly? Asked a long-sleeved classmate. The Sky is just a government office worker, why get so excited? Said a young man in the crowd, dressed in a Zhongshan suit, a round hat with an inch head, and a pretty appearance. He is the one in the entire classroom who dresses most like a modern person. Zhuge Mingxin, with the courtesy name Zigu, is a collateral disciple of the Zhuge family among the three major aristocratic families in Jingle City. Zhang Bai's mind flashed with information about the other party. Well, since that's the case, you worked so hard to participate in the assessment yesterday. Yang Liyang replied lazily. My name is. Without waiting for Zhuge Mingxin to argue, everyone sat back together and quickly quieted down. A middle-aged man walked up from the side to the teaching table in front of him. He was also dressed in a pitch-black Zhongshan suit, with short hair and a Zhongshan hat, exuding a strong elegance throughout his body. This is their master, Kong Xianzhang, one of the backbone of the reformist faction at Jingle Academy, and can be considered a prominent figure. The two major factions of academies, conservative and innovative, are both comparable to Kong Xianzhang. It was also because of the reformists that Zhang Bai had the opportunity to continue his studies, so he had great respect for this master. And this master also values Zhang Bai very much, often taking care of his original body. Of course, this is not an unfounded love, mainly because one's original academic background is quite impressive, and one can compete for the top spot with wealthy disciples like Zhuge Mingxin and Yang Liyang as a humble disciple. You should know that in such an era, even traditional Confucianism is difficult to learn much without wealth, let alone the reformists who still need to learn new knowledge. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Professionals. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Professionals. After Confucius Kong Xianzhang arrived at the classroom, the surroundings immediately quieted down. The person I named below, come up to the front stage. He looked around the crowd, but instead of starting teaching as usual, he took out a list and said, Zhuge Mingxin, Yang Liyang, Lu Wenguang, Zhang Bai. 20 or so people, one by one, turned their gaze to Zhang Bai and others, envious and disdainful. Zhang Bai ignored everyone's emotions and came to the podium, standing with the other three people. Today's morning self-study. Kong Xianzhang finished speaking to everyone below and said to Zhang Bai and the other four, you guys, come with me. Upon hearing this, the four of them silently followed Kong Xianzhang. Kong Xianzhang didn't speak anymore. He carried his hands behind his back and silently left the classroom, leading the few of them. Zhang Bai quietly observed the other three people. Except for him, they were all the kind of people who could afford to wear modern clothing. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that all three of them came from relatively good families. Because in this era, those who wear ancient costumes and long shirts may not necessarily be from a humble family, but those who wear modern clothing with Western elements are definitely not from a humble family. Speaking of foreign cloth alone, it is one of the most expensive fabrics. Among them, Yang Liyang and Lu Wenguang didn't have much to do. Although they knew a bit of news, they probably didn't have much, and their attitude was similar to that of Zhang Bai. Only Zhuge Mingxin seemed to know a lot, and Zhang Bai clearly felt the other party's expectations, as well as the suppressed excitement. This kind of performance is completely different from the indifferent, even somewhat disdainful attitude in the classroom just now. Obviously, the information he received indicates that there are significant benefits. Academies were the layout of ancient academies, so teachers had their own rooms, including study rooms, bedrooms, kitchens, and so on. In a moment, Kong Xianzhang led Zhang Bai and the four of them to a study. At this moment, there is actually a middle-aged uncle in the study, who is in his 40s, with an ordinary appearance, temperament, and clothing. He is completely thrown into the crowd and cannot find that kind. The other party was sitting in the study, originally looking at an unknown copy. When Kong Xianzhang and Zhang Bai entered, they didn't get up. The two of them nodded in familiarity, and the middle-aged man put down his notebook. Kong Xianzhang then went to the study and sat down at the desk for writing. After Zhang Bai and the other four followed in, they only politely bowed to the middle-aged man because Kong Xianzhang did not introduce them. The middle-aged man did not respond to them, but began to look at the four people standing in the room. After a moment of silence in the room, Kong Xianzhang looked at the four of them and asked with a hint of contemplation, "Do you know what's going on when I asked you to wait?" Zhang Bai, Yang Liang, and Lu Wenguang all shook their heads in silence. Upon hearing this, Zhuge Ming seemed to no longer hold on to his inner expectations and said, "But does the academy have a place for reform and cultivation?" The middle-aged man beside him immediately looked at Zhuge Mingxin with a scrutinizing gaze upon his words. "Student Zhuge Mingxin, I have met this teacher." Zhuge Mingxin immediately responded with a smile on his face due to the other party's undisguised scrutiny. "Zhuge, I don't have the ability to be your teacher." The middle-aged man pouted and his expression moved, saying, "Zhuge Ling, that old man, has a good plan. Taking advantage of this opportunity, all parties are stuck, and even the soup and water in my patrol room are not leaking." Zhuge Mingxin's smile stiffened, and he dared not take up the conversation. The middle-aged man seemed to just casually say something and didn't continue speaking. Kong Xianzhang glanced at the middle-aged man and turned around to say, "Today I called you to come and tell you in advance about the matter of this practitioner." Zhang Bai's eyes lit up slightly, as he was about to enter the extraordinary circle of this world. He was worried about how to get started, and he came just in time. Yang Liang and Lu Wenguang on the side were also stunned, and their eyes flickered with light. Obviously, the two also understand the importance of this opportunity. With Kong Xianzhang's popularization of science, Zhang Bai gained a certain understanding of the extraordinary system of this world. In this world, there are countless paths to transcend, or in other words, as long as one has the cultivation qualifications and corresponding opening methods, anyone can embark on their own path of cultivation. Formerly known as a cultivator, now with the impact of Western culture, it has been changed to a professional because this name is more appropriate. It's easy and simple to be extraordinary. As long as there are corresponding methods and sufficient knowledge, any profession can be extraordinary. For example, doctors, with specific methods and resources, can achieve extraordinary success and become medical professionals with their systematic medical knowledge. Because of this, the knowledge of the system of this world is very precious. Anyway, there are countless paths, but getting started is not easy, probably due to historical reasons. Well, the evolutionary history of this profession, well, as I mentioned before, this world has only gone through two dynasties since the Qin and Han dynasties. The Great Qin dynasty, which lasted for thousands of years, followed by the present-day Great Xia dynasty, which has lasted for over 400 years. However, the law of 300 years of collapse in previous dynasties does not apply in this world. The reason for this is that this world is different from the past, because it has extraordinary power and is very prosperous. According to legend, in ancient times, the cultivation of this world was not like this. There were only Taoist traditions such as immortals, Buddhas, demons, and demons. Practitioners were transcendent and did not live in the same world as mortals. However, during the spring and autumn and warring states periods, this situation underwent earth-shattering changes. At that time, cultivation was flourishing, and countless heavenly pride emerged. They took a different path and opened up strange paths of cultivation that were completely different from ancient immortal paths. What Mahist institutions, Confucian writings, legalist laws, military campaigns, farming supplies, medical salvation, and so on. These heavenly pride emerged during the warring states period, and various paths of cultivation were constantly emerging. In that special era, 100 flowers bloomed and competed for excellence. In history, this is called 100 schools of thought contending. Afterwards, it underwent some historical changes and achieved results during the Han Dynasty. In the end, Confucianism flourished and surpassed hundreds of schools of thought, becoming another avenue after ancient paths such as immortality, demons, and Buddhas. People call this a struggle for fate, and it is ultimately the fate of Confucianism. Therefore, in the following era, Confucianism and Taoism flourished unstoppably, traveling for nearly 2,000 years. But it's funny to say that for thousands of years, countless people have gradually accepted the fact that besides the ancient path, 100 cultivation methods can also achieve enlightenment, but no one has ever investigated the reason, and no one has asked why. Why can a scholar possess the same power as a cultivator, cultivate the same, and ascend to the summit? 100 schools of thought contend, Tianjiao shines and creates countless paths, and everyone rightfully accepts it. And there are also differences between the East and the West in this world, as well as other civilizations. The most powerful civilization in the West is the numerous dynasties inherited from ancient Roman civilization. In ancient times, like the East, they also had ancient paths of cultivation. Like the few paths in the East, they only had extremely rare paths such as magicians and priests to cultivate. But unlike the East, although they had the same Roman Empire as the Qin dynasty and achieved the unification of civilization, this unification did not continue. After the fall of the Roman Empire, it was never able to be unified again. There has been no 100 schools of thought or a new path of growth, so the path of extraordinary power has always been rare. This situation persisted until hundreds of years ago. With the development of the times and the spread of culture, the East and the West have begun to come into contact. Westerners have discovered the cultivation system of Xia, which amounts to hundreds, forming a huge gap from the few they only have. Then comes the lack of understanding. Immortal cultivators are nothing more. In their eyes, this is just a type of magician, but why can reading also cultivate and possess extraordinary power? In the eyes of Easterners, it is natural for a strategist to influence the world with one plan, but in their view, it is completely unreasonable. And because of this lack of understanding, there is research on practitioners. After studying for many years, the West finally made astonishing discoveries. The path of cultivation is not fixed at all, or in other words, practitioners have no distinction between cultivators, scholars, strategists, or the like. A cultivation that looks completely different actually has the same core essence. This world, the knowledge that forms a system, is power. As long as you have systematic knowledge and complete the extraordinary threshold in a certain way, you can enter the corresponding path of cultivation. The core of the beginner's cultivation of qi for immortals is like this, and the same goes for the longevity of the righteous spirit of the scholar Haran. The same goes for the magician's meditation and matchmaking of fireballs. The manifestation is different, and the core is knowledge. Because of these discoveries, the West has given practitioners a unified name for practice. Professionals. The moral is, all professions in the world can actually enter cultivation. Because of this fundamental discovery, the West has started to rise in recent years, with various geniuses springing up like mushrooms after rain, competing for excellence. And after hundreds of years of dynastic turmoil, the great Xia has already begun to decay. If it weren't for the reasons of practitioners, it would probably have been replaced long ago. In this era, the West began to invade. In order to quell this invasion, the Xia signed many contracts and ceded a lot of land. So in today's era, we are roughly in the late Qing dynasty, shortly after the completion of the invasion by the Eight-Nation Alliance. Of course, there is still a significant difference from the Qing dynasty. Although the great Xia dynasty was turbulent, it was not shattered and there was no warlord melee. The fundamental reason is still due to the peak combat power in the central court. Even in the prosperous West, they dare not force too hard. Only then did this situation arise. However, in the great Xia dynasty, people had just experienced the crisis of ethnic extinction, and some members of the court realized the harm, while others were unaware of it. Therefore, two major camps emerged. The reformists and the conservatives. The old school is still indulging in extravagance, while the new school is working hard in various fields, trying to initiate reforms and learn from the West, and opening up the cultivation of professionals downwards, no longer only existing in aristocratic families and sections. At the same time, they constantly learn about the Western system and attempt to learn from foreign experts to control them. Even more powerful, I want to create a grand event in the pre-Qin era, open up 100 schools of thought, and emerge a new career path that can shoulder the burden, rise to fate, and prosper all beings. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Classmates. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Classmates. For a long time, with Kong Xianzhang's popularization of science, Zhang Bai gradually gained a certain understanding of the world, professionals, and their development history. Of course, he still doesn't know how to get started with extraordinary skills, how to turn knowledge into power, or even what systematic knowledge is. However, in Kong Xianzhang's account of the development history of practitioners, Zhang Bai saw the shadow of gunpowder in his past life. The same invention originated in the East, but flourished in the West. It was also oppressed by the East in turn, ceded territories and paid reparations, and at one point, the race was extinct. How similar. In Kong Xianzhang's lecture, he only provided them with a basic knowledge popularization, without delving deeper into it. Among the four of them, Zhuge Mingxin clearly knew all of these, and what he was looking forward to was what Kong Xianzhang was going to talk about next. After Kong Xianzhang finished popularizing his spiritual foundation, he gave a few people some time to digest before continuing, and our Jingle Academy's reformist faction was established through the reform and reform. Similarly, the patrol houses in the county, which are different from ordinary departments, are also a product of innovation. Nowadays, due to the short establishment time, many places are not perfect and there is a great shortage of manpower. I called you here this time because I have 4 spots in my hands as a teacher. Kong Xianzhang paused for a moment and looked at the 4 students with different expressions, saying, of course, if I were just looking for a government official to handle matters alone, I wouldn't have asked for a spot. The called for quotas refer to the reserve quotas for 4 professions of practitioners. Nowadays, the reform is still being explored. The higher authorities have decided to select a group of people, provide them with basic knowledge and corresponding resources, provide them with training, and then work for the court. And the qualifications of the 4 of you, I have checked and found that your cultivation qualifications, in terms of spiritual intelligence, are all qualified, so I plan to recommend you to intern. As for whether you can ultimately obtain the final professional quota, it's not something I can determine. You need to fight for it yourself, a competitive employment system similar to previous medical students. Zhang Bai's thoughts flashed, and Kong Xianzhang seemed to have only remembered something before saying, by the way, I seem to have forgotten to ask you. Are you willing? The 4 people who were receiving information from Kong Xianzhang were all stunned. The first person to react was Zhuge Mingxin, who could no longer suppress his joy. He immediately saluted and said, "Thank you, student, for nurturing me." Zhang Bai and the 2 people around seemed to have just regained their senses and immediately followed suit, bowing and saying, "Students, thank you very much for your cultivation." Kong Xianzhang saw this and did not immediately finalize it. Instead, he turned his head to look at the middle-aged man and said, "How is it?" The middle-aged man who had stopped looking at Zhang Bai and the 4 of them said nonchalantly, "All right, come and report tomorrow." So that's settled, Kong Xianzhang smiled and made the final decision. Then he turned to the 4 people and said, "Of course, you can't let go of your studies either. If the way to the police station doesn't work, you can still participate in the new style imperial examination, and there is still a way. Is this early diversion still retaining the qualification for the college entrance examination?" Well, to describe it as a split, it seems a bit insulting to this quota. After all, it is a distribution with staffing. Students understand. Zhang Bai, in his thoughts, saluted with a few others. That's it for today. If there's nothing else to do, you can go down. Kong Xianzhang waved his hand. Zhuge Mingxin and the three of them met in the ceremonial room, ready to leave the study, but Zhang Bai hesitated for a moment. Why, you have something else to do, kid? Kong Xianzhang looked at Zhang Bai and asked suspiciously. Upon hearing this, Zhang Bai hesitated and said, the student wants to ask, will they pay out of their own pocket during the internship assessment period, or will they receive a salary? Kong Xianzhang's face stiffened, and Zhuge Mingxin, who were originally curious about what he wanted to ask, were all shocked. Huh, interesting little guy. The middle-aged man laughed at the words and said. Of course, there is a salary, but there is still quite a bit. Whether you pass the assessment or not, during your time on duty, your salary is indispensable. The rest of our patrol room is fine, and the money is not bad. Upon hearing this, Zhang Bai breathed a long sigh of relief. The original brothers were so poor that they now have less than 61 in wealth, and may go bankrupt at any time. It can even be said that they have been on the brink of bankruptcy and have been in constant friction. He doesn't intend to continue living like this. If there's no salary, he'll have to find other ways to make money. Watching Zhang Bai breathe a sigh of relief, Zhuge Mingxin and the three of them had a strange expression. Kong Xianzhang, whose face was stiff, didn't say anything in the end and said calmly, if it's okay, let's go down. 4 people bid farewell and left during the ceremony. After the 4 of them left, Kong Xianzhang looked at the middle-aged man and asked, how about someone who is interested and directly in each other? The middle-aged man said helplessly, if you go through the back door or something, don't think about it. In the end, it depends on themselves. The previous 2 reforms did not show much effect, but now we need to take it seriously and there is no room for intervention. Oh, I'm not such a person. I asked these students if they have any outstanding qualities, Kong Xianzhang replied. The 2 of them should not be too familiar. Kong Xianzhang's personality is still unclear to him, so the middle-aged man rolled his eyes and didn't want to argue with him. He changed the topic and said. I came to see you today not for any reserve service matters. You just need to inform me about this. I came to see you because of yesterday's murder case. Kong Xianzhang's face became serious and he said, the sacrificial villain hasn't found any clues yet. The middle-aged man smiled bitterly and said, it's not just that he hasn't found a clue. What other situation could make your prosecutor so helpless? Kong Xianzhang asked curiously. The series of criminal acts committed by the villains in front of us has not ended yet. Yesterday, we discovered a benefactor who died of extreme exhaustion in the Tianxiang Tower, the middle-aged man replied. Kong Xianzhang frowned and said, your patrol room is now being excluded from managing such things. Don't tell me, after you let my students go to work, go catch chickens and look for ducks. The middle-aged man glanced at Kong Xianzhang again, as if he didn't have the time to argue with him. He said, it's just fine, and having 2 at the same time is not a big deal. But the reason why we discovered it yesterday was because we were intentionally lured by someone to discover it. Due to such doubts, the following person casually investigated. It's okay if we don't check, but this time we found out that in just 2 decades, there have been more than 10 people in the city who died on horseback. Because this kind of thing insults the reputation of the family, some people keep it a secret from reporting to the government, so no one pays attention. Upon closer investigation, it was discovered that the sacrificial case of the villain had almost started at the same time, but it was not as high profile as the other party, and the situation was made very secretive, in collecting and repairing evil cultivation. Kong Xianzhang said with a serious expression. The middle-aged man nodded and said, I think so. Alas, more and more ghosts and snakes are emerging now. Kong Xianzhang sighed upon hearing this. No, according to what was said above, this world may undergo a major change. Many sects and clans are beginning to emerge one after another, vying for some elusive fate, and even some are attempting to become saints. The middle-aged man sighed. The two of them fell silent for a moment before the middle-aged man continued, I came to see you today, but I really can't do anything about it. The higher-ups are urging me, so I want you to give it a try. After the four of them left the study, they all seemed quite excited. If the court provides resources to become practitioners, isn't there hope of a career change? Lu Wenguang said excitedly. The previous contact in this area was extremely limited, so Zhang Bai remained silent and just listened silently. Well, with the flourishing of innovation, there should be a chance to switch jobs if you put in more effort. Yang Liyang's face was also full of joy. Zhuge Mingxin glanced at the two of them and said, I'm not tall, but my heart is in the sky. Not to mention that this is just a reserve, it's not certain whether I will eventually get a spot. Just talking about achieving a junior apprentice profession at the beginner level depends on luck and luck. I haven't even reached the threshold yet, so I'm thinking about changing jobs. To become a teacher. You two are so idealistic. From the conversation between several people, Zhang Bai roughly figured out that the initial level of a professional should be. There are 9 levels of apprentices, 1 to 3 levels are junior apprentices, 4 to 6 levels are intermediate apprentices, 7 to 9 levels are senior apprentices, and then 1 transition to employment. Lu Wenguang's excited face stiffened, and Yang Liyang also put away his smile. With a cold eye, he looked at Zhuge Mingxin, whose joy was hard to conceal, and calmly said. Didn't Brother Zigu look down on this yamen job before? Now why not only don't you refuse the master, but you're also so excited, looking like you've made a lot of money. Zhuge Ming's expression stiffened and he said, what makes me happy is not about being a servant, but about practicing my profession. Oh, it's like you're not going to the patrol room to report or compete for a job tomorrow, Yang Liyang said lazily. Half a sentence without agreement. Zhuge Ming's face stiffened as he waved and dropped such a sentence before turning and leaving. Looking at Zhuge Mingxin's back, Yang Liyang looked down on him and said, always putting on such a superior posture, as if you think you're so remarkable. There's no way, after all, he's a descendant of a noble family, Lu Wenguang sighed, with a hint of envy in his words. What kind of disciple from a noble family? It's just a scene. When we come to the edge and compete for fame, we really treat ourselves as someone. If we were so capable, wouldn't Zhuge's family be able to lose his resources? Yang Liyang said disdainfully. Zhang Bai looked at Zhuge Mingxin, who had left, and then at Yang Liyang, without any intention of making a conversation. In the class, the predecessors Zhang Bai, Zhuge Mingxin, and Yang Liyang often competed for the top spot, which can be considered as a bit of competition. And this kind of competition often spreads from academic studies to various aspects of daily life, so the two of them always look down on each other. Zhuge Mingxin despises the other party for being extremely wealthy, and Yang Liyang also despises the other party for being a peripheral figure in the family. Those who support him cannot be considered as collateral members, and he often takes pride in this and likes to pretend to be forks. P.S. I saw someone asking about the update time. During the new book period, the updates will probably be very stable, and the initial schedule is set at 11 and 16 o'clock every day. Also, seeing someone say wrong spelling. When you see typos, you can correct them and catch bugs. I will make immediate corrections. Before each post, I also spend time reviewing the manuscript and have tried my best to pay attention to it. However, when I have time, it is difficult to notice any typos in my own writing. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Gathering Together. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 9. Businessmen. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Businessmen. The patrol room is also located in the south of the city, near the center of the city, not far from the academy, and only 3 blocks away throughout the journey. Zhang Bai walked in the walking room, and because he was not in a hurry for an afternoon, he seemed to be walking along the street. It can be said that in the entire Jingle city, the southern part of the city is the most able to see the changes of this era. Ancient and modern elements mix and alternate, and people wearing foreign clothes but with long hair can be seen everywhere. I feel like I have entered the legendary city of Beiping in the Republic of China, but with a slightly earlier era of culture and culture. Zhang Bai enjoys all of this quite interestingly. On the way, he even received an ancestral-level flyer, which he was surprised to receive in his hand. You should know that even though papermaking technology is already very good nowadays, even if it is poor paper, it is still relatively valuable. Using this for advertising costs a lot. Upon seeing it, Zhang Bai realized that it was not an advertisement on the streets of later generations, but a promotion of the new law reform or something that some people had secretly created. Well, it can't be considered black, it can only be considered things with gray edges. The flyers are not distributed by any students, it seems that they are those who work hard at the dock. Radicals within the reformist faction, or other groups. Zhang Bai took the flyer interestingly and browsed through the promotion above. Is that what the westernization movement did in the previous life, trying to extend the idea down to the common people? Zhang Bai shook his head and did not comment on it. He had just planned to throw away the flyer, but the slightly pungent ink smell coming from his nose made him pause slightly. He placed the flyer at the tip of his nose, sniffed it carefully, and then frowned even tighter. Without leaving a trace, he threw it away and turned 2 streets to reach the block where the patrol room was located. This is a main block, quite spacious, with a hint of future flavor. The headquarters of the patrol room looks like a quite imposing courtyard, with the main entrance different from the traditional yamen, which is built with bricks, stones, and cement, giving it a bit of the flavor of a republican courtyard. Compared to the surroundings, it appears somewhat imposing and foreign, as if standing out among chickens, with rotating guards at the entrance. Zhang Bai wandered around for a long time, thinking a lot, but couldn't find the reason to walk in. He hesitated and looked at the report voucher in his hand, which he used for reporting tomorrow. But although he can use this voucher to report on his internship tomorrow, he can't go to visit today, can he? It's not a past life. This kind of place, in this era, is considered an important place for the government. How could ordinary people wander around freely? After wandering around for a long time, Zhang Bai didn't think of a good solution. The predecessor's circle was too small, and the things they could do were limited. Even a small department under the patrol room, a constable in a street police department, is not something he can investigate in this era. Especially with his identity and circle, he is completely different from the other person's social class. So Zhang Bai pondered for a long time, but couldn't come up with any good solution. Looking up at the sun in the sky, it happened to be noon. Zhang Bai hesitated for a moment and strolled through the shops across from the patrol room. After a while, the target was determined and the most approachable store was found before walking in. "Sir, how many of you?" the waiter immediately asked. Zhang Bai calmly replied, "1. On your end, please." The shop assistant wanted to lead Zhang Bai to his seat. Zhang Bai, however, walked to a position in front of the window without considering himself and said, "Is there anyone here?" "Hey, there's no one around. Please do as you please, my guest." The waiter skillfully wiped the stool for Zhang Bai and gestured for him to sit down. As Zhang Bai sat down expressionlessly, the waiter asked, "Sir, what would you like to order?" "Our store's signs are." Zhang Bai raised his hand to stop the other party from announcing the dish name and said, "Sheep bone soup costs 1 yuan, right?" The shopkeeper was taken aback and nodded in surprise. Zhang Bai continued, "Give me 1, don't want anything else." Just 1 lamb bone soup?" the waiter asked in a daze. "Why, it's not possible." Zhang Bai replied calmly. "Well, that's not true, it's just." The waiter held it for a while before saying, "Do you need to serve food?" Zhang Bai waved his hand and said, "No need, just a portion of lamb bone soup will do." The shop assistant went down a bit confused, and Zhang Bai sat down expressionless. He also has no choice. The management of this street is better than in his past life. There is no small vendor setting up a stall in the entire street. Is it possible to stand outside the patrol room and keep an eye on them? And those who run tea houses and restaurants here are also quite high-end. He strolled around and saw several places, all of which were high-end consumption, starting at least 10 won. Although there are still more than 50 won in his pocket, not to mention that if he had a meal here, his brothers might have to deal with the problem of drinking from the west and north in the later stages. It's a bit impossible for him to spend so much money selling sweat on a piece of cloth alone. It's just what life needs, he can't even get through this level after a meal like this. So he strolled for a while and finally saw the menu on this listed restaurant, which had a 1-cent soup menu. Perhaps it was prepared thoughtfully for those frugal constables. So he came in and added a soup, only one soup. Shame on yourself, it's better to enjoy the peace of mind with the hard-earned money from Zhang Bucheng. Shopkeeper, there's a customer over there who ordered soup. How can I handle it? The waiter left his position for a moment before reacting from confusion and then walked up to the manager for help. What kind of soup? The manager, who was burying his head in accounting, was taken aback and looked up at the other person in confusion. The shop assistant hinted at his seat and said, just at the window, the young master Wen Wenjing ordered a lamb bone soup. Just one soup. The shopkeeper exclaimed in shock, there are no other dishes left. The waiter nodded and said, it's just a soup. It's not here to entertain us, is it? The shopkeeper looked up and saw a young man in a blue shirt sitting calmly at the window table. The other party's clothes were washed a bit white and looked a bit gray, obviously very old, but fortunately there were no patches. But the other person's handsome appearance elevated the clothes by several levels, making them look quite neat. The other party clearly ordered such a dish, but there was no sense of unease or shame. Sitting there seemingly casually, there was a calm temperament that permeated the air, with a hint of scholarly atmosphere. He was calm and composed, and at first glance, he was a scholar. Seeing this scene, the shopkeeper pondered for a moment and said, so, you can serve him a vegetarian dish and add another portion of rice. But I asked, he just wants a soup, the shopkeeper said without knowing what the shopkeeper was thinking. Go ahead, don't charge him any money, the shopkeeper instructed. Upon hearing this, the waiter replied, all right, I'll go and give orders to the kitchen. Wait, come back. The shop assistant took only 2 steps when the shopkeeper suddenly remembered something and called out. What other orders do you have? The waiter turned around and asked in confusion. Well, why don't you take the money? Take that penny. If he asks about this dish, you can tell him that I'm celebrating my birthday today and rewarding customers. The shopkeeper looked at Zhang Bai at the window and said. Shopkeeper, aren't you only half a month after your birthday? What kind of birthday did you celebrate? The shopkeeper asked in confusion. If I ask you to go, why are there so many? The shopkeeper said with a stern expression. Upon hearing this, the shopkeeper turned around and entered the kitchen. After ordering the dishes, he seemed to understand and returned to the counter, whispering, Shopkeeper, do you see someone down and want to invite that person? The shopkeeper glanced at the waiter but didn't respond. On weekdays, I haven't seen you so generous, giving those begging methods. The shopkeeper continued to ask in confusion, how could you be so kind today? The shopkeeper glanced at the waiter again and said, your old man has approached me several times to make you an apprentice with me. I didn't respond. Do you know why? Why? The shopkeeper said in confusion. What you see is called charity, what I make is called good luck. When you understand this, you can become my apprentice. The shopkeeper looked at the bewildered waiter and shook his head, without further words, continuing to calculate. The sharp words made the shopkeeper look uncomfortable but helpless. My guest, your dish. After a moment, the waiter held one dish and one soup and placed them in front of Zhang Bai. Zhang Bai looked at what was on the table, frowned slightly, and said, "I remember I only ordered one soup. We don't charge for these. Today is our shopkeeper's birthday, and we will reward our guests," said the shopkeeper with a smile. Upon hearing this, Zhang Bai was clearly stunned. Looking towards the distant counter, the other person seemed to be looking at this side as well. When Zhang Bai looked up, he smiled and nodded in response. To be honest, he was a bit surprised. I was already prepared to be ridiculed, but I didn't expect it to be such a situation. This is the first time I've had such an interesting birthday banquet. So, then I wish your shopkeeper all the blessings in the East China Sea and a longer life than in the South Mountain, Zhang Bai replied. Borrow your auspicious words, use them slowly. The shop assistant smiled and turned around to leave. Zhang Bai looked at the other person and then at the dishes in front of him. In the end, he didn't say anything and didn't refute their kindness. He sat silently by the window, slowly eating, and didn't take out the bread from his pocket. In this way, even though Zhang Bai finished eating, he didn't leave, but sat there, quietly looking across the street. I waited for a long time until lunchtime passed, and Zhang Bai didn't see anyone who wanted to see come out. In this era, do police officers patrol or not? Or is that woman not a police officer? I don't know when, but there was no one left in the hall. The shopkeeper finished his work and walked towards Zhang Bai at the window. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. The Failed Pursuit. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. The Failed Pursuit. He came to Zhang Bai and bowed to her, saying, "I'm sorry to bother this young master, Zhou Tai." Zhang Bai returned to his senses and stood up to salute the old man, saying, "What's up, Manager Zhou? Young master, you've finished eating. I'll have someone take it." Zhou Tai smiled and added, "Of course, young master, you can sit for as long as you want." Zhang Bai nodded and said, Let's keep it." Great. The shop assistant following behind the shopkeeper heard this and immediately got started, quickly putting away the utensils. "Young master, do you want to talk?" The shopkeeper hesitated for a moment and took the initiative to ask. Zhang Bai glanced at the other person, who was in his 50s, but did not look old. He was somewhat wealthy and not very fat. He wore a long robe that was not too glamorous, but neatly organized. "That's great." Zhang Bai smiled and said, "You don't need me to invite the shopkeeper to sit down, do you?" He, the young master's speech is quite witty. "It's not necessary." As he spoke, he sat across from Zhang Bai. But after sitting down, the two fell into a moment of silence. Such silence made Zhou Tai think he was different, and this person was not here to inquire about the news. "Are you also from Jingle City?" Zhou Tai, who was silent for a moment, didn't let the atmosphere become frosty before taking the initiative to break the silence. Zhang Bai nodded and said calmly, "I live in the west of the city and am currently studying at Jingle Academy." Upon hearing this, Zhou Tai's eyes lit up and he smiled, saying, "So it's a scholar master." Zhang Bai smiled and waved his hand, saying, "I haven't tried yet, and I don't necessarily know how to go." Without waiting for Zhou Tai to inquire, Zhang Bai took the initiative to continue, "Today, my mentor has found a job to live in the patrol room across from me. I usually just bury my head in reading and have no understanding of it. So taking advantage of the half-day off, I want to come early to familiarize myself. After all, I am a bit nervous about going on duty tomorrow. But I don't have any acquaintances inside, so I can only sit with you and think about taking a look from afar, so I can feel more at ease tomorrow. I can't believe it. These workers don't usually come out. Young master, you are really skilled." Zhou Tai's eyes lit up after hearing this, and he praised him before replying, "Young master, you actually didn't come by chance. I heard about some big case these days. There have been several homicide cases in Xicheng and Beicheng, so the patrols have all gone out. If it were usual, when I had dinner before, would have been booked by some patrol adults. It was really lively. Really, I see. Zhang Bai said suddenly. So, one of them wanted to talk, and the other wanted to talk. The two of them just got along and started chatting. By the way, how many female constables are in the patrol room? Zhang Bai suddenly asked for a long time. Zhou Tai paused for a moment, then gave Zhang Bai a meaningful glance and said, "Young master, if you want to ask about anything else, I may not necessarily know. If you ask about this, I really know a lot." Zhang Bai's eyes lit up a lot, changing his previous indifference and seeming to be interested. With a smile that men all understand, he said, "Really, let's talk about it. Let's go to the patrol room. There are only 4 female constables, all of whom are detectives. After all, women couldn't have been any constables before." After chatting for a long time, Zhou Tai finally said goodbye and left. I don't know if the other party really doesn't know much, or if they have a heavy heart. Anyway, it seems like I've talked a lot, but in fact, I haven't even revealed any information about daily life. What I'm talking about is all hearsay and gossip. Zhang Bai didn't intentionally ask anything, but after Zhou Tai left, he waited for a long time. Finally, in the middle of the afternoon, towards evening, he saw patrol detectives returning with teams of constables. I also saw Zhang Bai from the women's first team. They were dressed the same as ordinary constables and had the same team configuration. Without a high-end cyclist, if it weren't for Zhou Tai's certainty that the other party was a patrol officer, Zhang Bai would have thought that woman Jia was just a constable. After that, there was no follow-up. After looking for half an afternoon, Zhang Bai just glanced at it. There was no progress in any contact or investigation, which was considered futile. As for waiting for someone to finish work and following them up on their own. He's not sick in the head. Leaving aside the question of whether the other party is a professional or not, is it possible for him, as a rookie, to follow a professional detective or a female detective without being discovered? In this era, women who can enter such places to handle affairs either have extremely strong backstage or extremely strong professional skills. After all, equal rights have not yet flourished. Anyway, no matter what the situation is, if Zhang Bai rashly follows up, it is a sign of being brainwashed. Never mind, I'll be on duty tomorrow and investigate the situation slowly. Zhang Bai whispered to himself, got up and left the store, looked in the direction, and headed towards the West City. Zhang Bai didn't go home directly, but thought of the tired look on Zhang Bucheng's face last night. He touched the copper coin in his pocket and hesitated for a moment before arriving at a nearby street called Xinda Street. It's already evening now, and it's already early to get off work. Therefore, the entire street is filled with a strong atmosphere of fireworks, vendors selling, and aunties fighting to add 1 or 2 more wild vegetables, all in a continuous stream. Such a scene is really hard to see in a past life. Zhang Bai strolled down the street, feeling both familiar and unfamiliar. Familiarity came from his predecessor, and strangeness came from himself. "Huang Bo, how do you sell this meat today?" Zhang Bai came to a stall and poked a piece of pork belly with his finger, asking. "Oh, it's the second son of the Zhang family. What's going on? It's not like the Chinese New Year is celebrated today. How could you be willing to see any meat and fish?" said the middle-aged man in his 50s, familiar with Zhang Bai. 5 flowers and 8 1, this is top-quality fat, it's not boring. Watching the old man with a proud and not boastful expression on his face, Zhang Bai was taken aback and realized that in this era, meat is rare, and fat should be more expensive than lean meat. "What about these pork ribs?" Zhang Bai asked in his thoughts. "For 1. Zhang Bai nodded and said, "Okay, give me 2 pounds of pork ribs." "Oh, it seems like you've really made a fortune by spending so much money, kid," the other person smiled as they played with the pork ribs. Zhang Bai smiled without saying a word, because his home was next door. From childhood to adulthood, these people were all old acquaintances. Who doesn't know him? Therefore, he maintains his original persona, speaking little but not coldly. Apart from warmly greeting, he only takes 1 or 2 sentences when necessary. "Aunt Chi, how do you sell these potatoes?" Zhang Bai asked at the nearby stall after picking up the meat and paying for it. "1 is 2 Jin," the aunt who sells potatoes enthusiastically replied. "Cheng, give me 2 pounds. You need to choose a bigger one, a fresher one," Zhang Bai warned. "There is no such arbitrary market here as in later generations. At least when you buy groceries, someone will take them for you. You can only keep an eye on them and say a few words. Don't worry, your 7th aunt, I can still make your child suffer losses. Isn't that embarrassing, my old face?" Zhang Bai showed a warm smile and did not answer again. In a friendly tone, there was a hint of literati. Immediately, Zhang Bai bought another penny of garlic and ginger before getting up and leaving. Ah, these 2 young boys from the Zhang family are really unlucky. No, if Dr. Zhang were still here back then, he would have been 2 young masters too. Who said it's not, especially this second son, who is said to be the leader of Jingle Academy now. Ah, it's just that the boss is a bit out of tune, otherwise it wouldn't be like this. Look at this second son's quiet writing, he looks like a Mr. Reader. Hi, this boss is not easy either. He went to the dock to move goods when he was 18 or 19 years old. He used to be raised by a young master. That was his own wrongdoing a few years ago. If it weren't for this second person's early understanding, it would probably have been gone long ago. Zhang Bai went to the street and bought 6 kilograms of rice at a rice shop, spending another 9 yuan. I spent a full 20 yuan today, about 3 days of work for Zhang Bucheng, and had to work the entire process for 3 days. Looking in his pocket, there were still 30.6 yuan left, and Zhang Bai was a bit speechless. As a modern Chinese, the awareness of saving money is ingrained in my genes, and I feel anxious when I don't have any savings. He really doesn't understand what kind of life is necessary to achieve the current situation. It's almost like working and eating for a whole day, but it's difficult if he doesn't work for a few days or something happens, such as getting sick. The 2 brothers have a family background, not to mention savings. A little accident can completely bankrupt this family and lead to the final sale of their property. In his thoughts, Zhang Bai returned home and went to the kitchen. Proficient in cooking, washing meat, and handling potatoes. Although all the tools rely on a knife, he doesn't feel like he can't handle them from the countryside, it's just a bit troublesome. Having prepared the materials, Zhang Bai looked at the seasoning jar. I'm quite lucky, and there's also a small piece of yellow sugar. Then make it into 2 dishes, just be more exquisite. Humming an unknown tune, seizing the time, he began to slowly cook. It took almost an hour to cook the braised pork ribs with potatoes, along with the barely calculated caramelized sweet and sour pork ribs. After looking at the sky, it's already dark outside and we should be back soon. Jiya. Just as the idea emerged, the old courtyard door was pushed open, and Zhang Bucheng carried his tired body into the courtyard. In an instant, a pungent aroma struck, and he was completely stunned. I'm back. Then wash your hands and eat. Zhang Bai put away the contentment on his face and changed it to an expressionless one. With a voice that didn't contain any emotional fluctuations, he served the food while saying. Zhang Bucheng still couldn't recover from his daze. He looked at the 2 dishes served by Zhang Bai in the living room and his walking figure, dazed and lost in thought. Zhang Bai then took out a basin of hot water and said coldly, wash your hands. Zhang Bucheng finally came to his senses, his expression inexplicable, and he began to wash his hands. His hands were clearly stained with pitch-black stains, and there were also stains on his short trigrams, even rubbing against his exposed arms. End of this chapter.